Ready? So this is part 2 of Buddhism. My name is Madrea. I'm here at the Eco Yoga Village in northern New South Wales, Australia. So today we're just going to talk about the Four Noble Truths. And just before we do that, as a little introduction to Buddhism, it is worth noting that although we tend to think of Buddhism as a religion amongst the 5 largest religious traditions on the earth, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism, it does fit the model, but at the same time, it's a little bit different. Buddhism was part of a whole group of movements that started at that time, about 2,500 years ago in India, about the same time as Pythagoras in the Greco-Roman world was running his spiritual communities, also teaching karma and reincarnation and meditation and so on. So at that same time, there was a kind of renaissance happening in India. And scholars, they call it the Shramana movements. Jainism, if you've heard of Jainism, was also one of those movements. There were many. And they were basically a reaction against an overly complicated, overly ritualistic, corrupt, religious monopoly that was going on at that time. And specifically, the thing that's probably mentioned more than any other is rampant animal slaughter, which Buddha was against, actually. And Buddhism, one of the core tenets is ahimsa, or non-violence. Ahimsa, non-violence. And especially, of course, all living entities, but especially it seems that at that time in history, the slaughterhouse industry, under the guise of some religious sacrifice, was going on in a very excessive way. And so having some kindness, having some compassion for the poor animals and birds, Lord Buddha brought that idea, animal rights. So Buddhism is a tricky one. It is not exactly a religious process. It is something a little bit similar to when people are frustrated in their desire to access spirituality. They simply try in different ways, like we see this whole yoga demographic over the last few decades developing in the West. Some people who felt themselves a little bit stymied, a little bit restricted, frustrated, somehow unhappy with the religion that they had grown up with, or that they were familiar with in their culture, say here in Australia or in the United States or Canada or New Zealand or so on. They turn to things like yoga, meditation, kirtan, different practices like that, which are not exactly religious, but are nonetheless spiritual and resonate with a large group of people. So Buddhism is something in there. Generally, Buddhism is known as non-ontological. Ontology means those things which cannot be broken down anymore. So, like God, for example, the concept of God, without getting into who that might be, or is there a God, is there not a God, but just as a concept, as a philosophical concept, God would be considered an ontological principle. A person who has always been, who will always be, who cannot be broken down and separated into parts. Similarly, the living entity, or material energy. So these individual books, or paintings, or this floor, or these pillows, they can all be broken down into molecules, or atoms, or things like that. But the actual quantum field, the actual energy itself, is an ontological principle. It cannot be broken down any further. So Buddhism, or Lord Buddha, he seemed to avoid that. In fact, I've heard Buddhists tell me that when Buddha was asked, is there a God, is there a soul, he would deflect. He would say something like, don't worry about that right now. Let's just become healthy and happy and peaceful and non-violent. And from that platform, perhaps other things will come. So this is a little introduction to the core tenets of Buddhism. And I think we'll have 2 more parts in this little lecture series. So my dear friends, another day. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Madrea here at the Eco Yoga Village in northern New South Wales. Take care.